Are you content in any and every situation, or do you worry a lot? Do you deal with anxiety a lot? Do you wonder, God, what's going on a lot? Do you struggle a lot? Paul didn't say, you know what, God made sure that nothing ever happened to me. He said that in the things that have happened to me, I have found peace. I have found contentment. Dare I say, I have found joy, even in the difficulties of life. I don't think there's anybody who embodies this principle more than a couple who have been a part of our church for many, many years. I'm talking about Dan and Laura Oskey. Put their picture up on the screen. This is Dan and Laura. Kind of put a face with a name. They've been a part of our church for many, many years. They volunteered in our kids' ministry. Generous people, wonderful people. Dan has been active his whole life, coached soccer, played soccer, but in 2011, Dan was diagnosed with ALS. And if you don't know what ALS is, about a year and a half ago maybe, we all did the Ice Bucket Challenge. You remember that? If you don't remember ALS, you remember the Ice Bucket Challenge. It was to raise awareness for ALS, which is a horrible, horrible disease that basically keeps your brain from being able to send signals to your muscles so that your muscles can move. What happens essentially is that you lose control of all your muscles to the point that it eventually takes your life. You lose the ability to breathe, to speak, to move. It's a horrible, debilitating disease. And yet when you talk to Dan and Laura, these are not people without hope. These are not people in despair. These are not people wondering, why, God, did this happen to me? In fact, I want to share with you just a piece of a letter that Dan wrote recently. He wrote this in March, and it's a letter he titled Perspective. This is just a portion of that letter, but it's kind of gives you an insight into his psyche and what's going on with Dan these days. And this is what he says. He says, today, when you see me, I am always in an electric wheelchair. I need this machine to go everywhere. Think about this. Once able-bodied, once able to run and play soccer and do what you love and be active, and now in a wheelchair everywhere you go. It's incredible. He says, what you don't see is all the care and help that is required to get me in the wheelchair as well as through each day. I have no independence in the most basic things that I need to do each day. Things such as eating, brushing my teeth, making a phone call, using the restroom, getting dressed, taking a shower, or getting in and out of bed require help from someone. Your perspective on my situation may be to feel sorry for me, think I might be bitter or angry at God, or you may want to avoid me because being around me makes you uncomfortable. Or maybe you think I should feel hopeless in this disease. You couldn't be more wrong. My perspective is that ALS really does suck. However, my perspective is that God is able to work through it and in it for my good, and He has. I won't lie, some days are harder than others, but my hope is in Christ. He has met all my needs during this time in my life, and I know I will eventually live in His presence, healed and whole. During this time in my life, I have learned what true faith is and how to completely trust God. Listen to this is incredible. I find joy in my life and see miracles around me all the time. Dan's story is an amazing story because even in the midst of pain, even in the midst of a terrible disease, one that God did not cause, Dan is able to find satisfaction and peace even in the middle of it. And Dan, this is what's crazy, Dan believes he's healed. Whether on this side of eternity or on the other, it makes no difference. He winds up healed and whole with Jesus. Either way. How do you survive something like this? How do you live through something like this? I want you to think about this. Because when you lose what Dan has lost, the ability to move, to speak, to be who you've been, you can't go to work anymore, you can't do the things that you were anymore, that has to mess with your identity. I mean, imagine that you couldn't do any of the things that make you you. Do you even exist? Is there even a you left? How do you find purpose in any of this? How do you find purpose in this pain? And Dan, like Paul, has found the secret to being content in any and every situation. The secret comes from Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2. We read it earlier, but we're going to read it again. Here it is, the first few words. Look at this. Looking to Jesus. How do you endure? Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter. Another translation says the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, knelt and prayed, and he said, Father, if it's possible, take this cup from me. Meaning, if there's another way, if there's another way through this, through what I'm about to suffer, if there's any other way, reveal it to me now. Either way, your will be done. Jesus knew what it was to suffer pain and find purpose in it and joy through it. And that's what Dan has found. He's found joy even in the midst of pain and even in this difficult season, again, which God did not cause. Dan has found incredible joy. They've been able to help people. They've been more generous rather than less generous. They've been out there more rather than just pulling in and just holding up and waiting. He's found joy and purpose in a difficult season. And thank God for most of us, most of our problems aren't anything compared to what Dan is facing. But it's the same principle applies. When you look to Jesus, when he is your focus, it takes your eyes off of all the petty things that we look at so often. I'm convinced that when many of us get to heaven, we're going to look at our lives and say, why did I worry so much? Why was I so anxious? Why was I so uptight? Why did I get so frustrated? Why did I not realize that I was a part of something so much bigger than me? That's what looking to Jesus is about. It's about recognizing that ultimately, at the end of the day, when it's all over and time in this world or your time in this world ends, that ultimately you end up with him. What are you doing about that now? Why are we so focused on all the things that we get focused on now? The reason that we're in so much pain is because we're looking at the wrong stuff. We're looking at the wrong things. We're looking at the wrong people. We're not focusing on the one who transcends all of the pain of this life, the one who is the author and the finisher of our faith.